course, individual preference. Head and mind to clear negative thoughts and bring mental clarity. Eyes to help us see the world honesty and compassion. Ears to listen with respect without judgment. Mouth to speak truthfully and kindly. Heart to feel and act with love, humility, and courage. Body to cleanse away negativity and prepare to act in a good way. Feet to walk gently and purposely on the earth. While the smudging ceremony is occurring, the guests in the room may make quiet or say prayer, setting positive intentions for the meeting or the day. Smudging the mind means letting go of distractions, stress, or harmful thoughts, and opening up with awareness, respect, and understanding. It is important to approach smudging with respect and a good heart. It's not just a ritual, but a spiritual and cultural practice and deep meaning. Indigenous people honor these practices with deep respect and gratitude, as these traditions guide us in creating respectful, inclusive ways. So with that, I'm going to come around and smudge everyone, okay? Okay. Keep on the screen, I'll just give you a virtual smudge. We're going virtual. One virtual.
Oh,
In or no?
I think I am in.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure.
I don't know if you can see me or not.
I think we can hear you, so you gotta mute.
That was great. You look so purified. I can feel the softness in the air. I'll start off our prayer now, okay? Creator, we feel your presence here guiding us, holding space for our vision and our hearts. To our ancestors known and unknown, we are grateful for the foundation you laid out for us. We feel you here today, and we promise to walk in a good way. We call upon the earth beneath our feet to steady and support the relationships we are creating today. And we call on our hearts and spirits. May we envision that we're seated in a circle, connected equally, speaking with humility, grace, and respect. May the words of this prayer touch all of our kin and all of our creation as we dream great things into being. Miigwech, thank you.
Good morning. I'll be delivering the land acknowledgement today on behalf of the guests in the room who are non-Indigenous and acknowledging the guests in the room that are Indigenous to these lands. Although some of us are in different locations and meeting remotely today, we would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. The city also acknowledges that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Miigwech.
Good morning. My name is Dawn Sutherland. I'm the Vice Chair of the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome all of you to our 8th annual meeting of the permit. Sorry, 8th meeting of the permit. The clerk has confirmed that we have a quorum, so I will call the meeting to order. Welcome. This meeting is being held as a hybrid meeting in Committee Room 1 at City Hall, and also using the city's WebEx technology, with members, staff, and the public connecting by video conference or calling in. We ask for your patience with any delays and technical issues. Members of the public may also attend in person or participate electronically by video conference
Testing, can the members online hear us now?
Okay, now we should be good.
Are we okay now?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you ask if they can hear you?
Can everybody hear me? I see Suzanne nodding. Okay, great. Members of the public may also attend in person or participate electronically by video conference using the city's WebEx technology. A few reminders. Members, please keep your cameras on. If members wish to ask questions of staff or to speak, please raise your hand or unmute your mic and indicate your intention to speak, and I'll create a speakers list. When voting on an item or a motion, I would ask members to turn on your video and raise your hand to indicate your vote. If there is a recorded vote, you will be asked to state if you are in favor or opposed. Members, I want to remind you that you must submit motions in writing. The clerk's staff are available at aaac@toronto.ca to help with motions. May I have a motion to confirm the minutes of the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee on July 29th, 2025? Suzanne moves. All in favor? Carried. We will now proceed to consider the 4 items on the agenda. Our first item is AA 8.1, acknowledging the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th, 2025. Adriana Villagas Majora, Manager, Reconciliation and Equity Learning, and Cynthia Stone, Coordinator, Training and Development from People and Equity Division, are here to give a presentation to the committee. Ladies.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Adriana, and I'm the manager for the Reconciliation and Equity Learning. A pleasure to be here. Our mandate is to advance reconciliation and equity learning initiatives for the city so staff can better serve Torontonians. Our focus is on serving learning opportunities that drive change and are reflective of the communities we serve, including Indigenous communities. We are looking forward to working with you, and I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Cynthia to talk about this year's NDTR plan events for staff. Thank you.
Annie Bojo, hello everyone. I am Cynthia Stone, and as noted by our wonderful manager here, we are here to speak about the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Now, with our divisional mandate, we are pairing information with inspiration. That is the goal. And so that has actually allowed us to really expand our reach. What we found up to date is that a lot of our Toronto public servants wanted to get involved, but just due to limitations in terms of timing, ability to come to the city, and various other factors, we found that the turnout could be improved. So that put our good minds to work, and so we came up with a strategy. And I would say that so far, so great. All right, so we really, to give you a briefer, some background, in keeping with the community direction, and of course there are ongoing consultations with community, bringing unity to our greater community, I would say. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation Action, as we like to call it, is newly commemorated with limited internal programming virtual efforts. They were separate from the Indigenous Legacy Gathering. And so what we opted to do this year was to expand it to a month long. That's right. So we're already seeding that awareness so that it's not a one and done approach. That National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is really about encouraging us to step into a better city for all of us. So initial efforts were centralized. We had a focus on virtual and the downtown core. And we now have expanded our programming to be accessible across the Greater Toronto Area. We had limited collaboration with Indigenous partners from the beginning, but now we have grown and our efforts are centered around the Indigenous Legacy Gathering. Programming has been co-created with our partners, Indigenous, including Toronto Council Fire. Now, what we have in store for you this year is absolutely remarkable. So right now, really centering around the truth, we are partnered with Algoma Shingwalk schools. So they, for those who are not aware, actually took over the Shingwalk Residential School, had a special commitment with the community to be able to inform and let people know the history there. So what they are offering is both in-person and virtual walks. Now, with it being in Sault Ste. Marie, not everybody is able to fly there. So we are doing it virtually. It's about a 90-minute commitment, and it allows you to really walk through that property and hear those testimonies and be moved. Very, very amazing reflections or views and responses that we've gotten to date. We're also focusing on the here and now. The Reconciliation, Day has really been focused on the past up to now, and so we really wanted to bring it into a modern day lens to show how it impacts our residents and why it is important for us as Toronto public servants to be a part of the Recon City action. For that matter, we are actually showing a screening, a movie, The Grizzlies, and The Grizzlies actually focuses on a remote community, the Inuit, who are grappling with a high suicide epidemic. This story actually is a true story, and it focuses on one man who goes into that community and reintroduces the game of lacrosse, bringing unity to that community, helping them to reconnect to their roots and find something deeper. And it's truly a very moving film. It does come with a discussion guide, and we are encouraging divisions to have input from our Indigenous partners like Inuk Vicky and our matriarch on site to be able to really bring to life that idea, nothing about us without us. We also have a hologram experience. Now, this is something very new to the city. We are taking our message to the masses, and this is actually going to feature the son of the amazing Honorable Murray Sinclair, who is going to be done as a hologram, spreading a minute to win it, I would say. Just a call to action for people to stop and listen and reflect. And it's an innovative way to be able to impart that key messaging that we really want to convey. And then finally, we have our hybrid corporate event. So this is happening on the 29th, and it's happening at the Native Canadian Centre. And this is going to be information with inspiration. We are going to have a live testimony from a survivor who will be able to convey the strength and the hardship that has, come to light with this day. We're also going to be featuring a municipal panel discussion featuring 4 different municipalities: Mississauga, we are going to have Hamilton, we are going to have Toronto, and we are going to have London. And so this is a great way to really have that round table and be able to embark on strategies for success and how we can engage with collaboration across the nation. As Murray Sinclair noted, he said, education is what got us into this mess, and education is what will get us out. And so that's what we're doing, folks. We are pairing that knowledge, those seeds of wisdom, to help us move to create a better city for all of us. Miigwech, thank you.
Miigwech. We're now going to hear from Lindsay Kirchner from Task.
Sego, good morning, everyone. I'm actually speaking on behalf of and with permission from Toronto Council Fire Native Cultural Centre. Andrea Christian, who I don't know if she's joined us yet online or by phone, but we wanted to announce that on September 29th and 30th, they will be hosting the 8th annual IRSS Legacy Events, the Indian Residential School Survivor Legacy Events, in celebration of last year's launch of the Spirit Garden. And so this year will be the first year that we will get to collectively enjoy it. The event brings in roughly 10,000 people over the couple of days. Dozens of different organizations and countless vendors will be present for the day's events. And these are events that are community-led, community-created, and supported through the partnership with the City of Toronto and others to bring forward an opportunity to the public to create awareness about the significance of Indigenous presence and culture within the City of Toronto, history and contemporary issues. It's also an opportunity for Indigenous communities to come together in a good way. There'll be many organizations represented and many activations and programming happening throughout the duration of the events. It's a very big production. I'd say probably one of the largest in the city. It will be also supported by Tim Hortons, possibly RBC to set up this year for ATM for accessibility for folks who need cash. For the vendors, and I also understand that there will be a warming bus provided by the TTC. There's an orange shirt day bus that will be present for the event. So it's important to share that information and to promote, and I think more information will be circulated in the coming weeks and days leading up to the event. And so folks at the city are encouraged to participate, to be present, and to celebrate in a good way and commemorate residential school survivors as per call to action number 82, which is what the Spirit Garden represents. And just by way of context, in 2017, the conversation about that began. And initially, it was said that it couldn't be done. And today we can look out the window of this building and see that it can. And so just leave you with that little bit of inspiration, an opportunity to be mindful, reflective, and intentional and purposeful about what truth and reconciliation means, why it matters, and our enduring presence here in the City of Toronto. Now we'll go.
Miigwech. Thank you. Members, do you have any questions on this item? If so, raise your hand or unmute your mic to let me know. Okay. Are there any speakers to this item? If you wish to speak, please raise your hand or unmute your mic to let me know. Okay, hearing no further speakers, do I have a motion to receive the item for information? I can't see everybody. Did we get anyone?
Can members participating online please turn your cameras on?
I have a motion from Suzanne to accept for consideration. Those in favor? Carries. Miigwech. Our next item is AA 8.2, the Parkland Strategy and the Parks and Recreation Facilities Plan. Danielle Demarche, Senior Project Manager, Parkland Strategy, and Matt Bentley, Senior Project Manager, Facilities Plan from Parks and Forestry are here to give a presentation to the committee. Welcome.
Hi, everyone online. We're just taking a second to set up. Okay, I think that our presentation's showing online. Is that correct? Great, okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having us here today. We are very appreciative of the opportunity to be able to gather your feedback on our projects and get to know the members of this committee. We do hope that this is a start of a conversation on these topics. My name is Danielle Demarche. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a senior project manager in Parks and Recreation, and I am a settler on these lands with ancestors from different European countries. And I'm joined by my colleague, Matt Bentley, who will also be presenting with me today. Starting with some info on why we're here today and what we'll be presenting so that we can facilitate a discussion with this group. Matt and I are leading the reviews of two strategic documents that guide Parks and Recreation long-term planning and we're here today so we can receive feedback that will inform our process. Today's presentation is going to follow the outline that you see on the slide. So we'll start by introducing the two documents we're talking about, which is the parkland strategy and the facilities plan. Then we'll discuss the engagement that we've done so far, including who we've engaged with and also what we've heard. Then moving on to what comes next. So our upcoming engagement and also some of the proposed directions that we're thinking for the documents. And at the end of our presentation, we're hoping to gather your input on the work that we've done so far, anything that we're missing, and anyone else who we should be talking to. Myself and Matt are joined in the room by our team member, Selena, who's here to make sure that we are taking notes and gathering any feedback you provide with us today. And we've also brought our director with us today to make sure that we have that senior leadership representation in the room, and all of our materials have been developed in collaboration also with senior leadership. On the screen right now, you can see 3 strategic documents that guide investment across the city in Parks and Recreation. So the strategy on the right, which is Ravine Strategy, is grayed out. The Ravine Strategy is managed by the Urban Forestry team, who have recently been moved out of Parks and Recreation. But I did want to mention that strategy and its existence because we're still working very closely with the team that manages the Ravine Strategy, and the Ravine Network is a really important part of our parks network. But today we're talking about the 2 strategies that are in the green box you're seeing on the screen. So I'll start on Parkland Strategy right now and diving into what is that document, and then we'll go over to Facilities Plan. Okay, what is the Parkland Strategy? This is a document that's currently in effect. It was adopted in 2019. It is a citywide strategy, covers all corners of this city, and it directs investment in parkland across the city. It's about the land that makes up our parks, and the city has over 8,000 hectares of parkland. So a really, very important piece of that. The document does not get into detail on all elements related to parkland. For example, it doesn't provide information on each of our 1,500 plus parks and what should go into that park, and it also doesn't dive into the maintenance of each park that we have. It's a very data-driven document. It has multiple maps that analyze Toronto's park system in different ways. Some of those maps are looking at what are our current parkland provision levels. Some of them are looking forward-facing. What will our parkland provision be in the future? Which areas of the city have gaps in parkland provision? And all of these maps, they work on the assumption that a person has access to a park if it's within a 500-meter walking distance of their house, which is about 5 to 10-minute walk. And this is a document that helps city staff make decisions about parkland investment. So that's how the document gets implemented. We make sure that our Parks and Rec colleagues have a strong understanding of this document when they're making decisions about where to add new parks into the park system in the city, where to focus park improvements, or to do park studies. In addition to all the mapping, there's also some qualitative elements to the document about what makes a high quality park. You can see the colored boxes on the screen, and this is, there's more info of the details in the document, but we talk about what makes for a high quality park. And this, all of the content that's within the parkland strategy is what we're reviewing. So there's opportunities to make updates to any of these sections of content. Okay, one more slide about what is the parkland strategy. You're seeing some of the maps now on the screen. Key metric in the parkland strategy is about parkland provision. We calculate this by saying where are all the parks located in the city. We overlay on top of that where are all the people located, and then we determine how many square meters of parkland a person would have if they're living in a different area of the city. The average across the whole city is 28 square meters of parkland per person, but some areas have much less. The map on the left, the dark orange areas on the map are the parts of the map that have the lowest parkland provision per person. The other areas
some of them really close to the ravines, for example, have higher parkland provision per person. A lot of those dark orange areas are in the downtown or urban centers. And on the right-hand side is a map of our parkland priority areas. So all the maps within the document, they culminate into that map you're seeing on the right-hand side of the screen, and it helps us decide where do we really prioritize our investment in parkland. And we create this map by combining a couple of different factors, and that includes parkland provision rates, looking at which parts of the city have a really high density of people, and we also currently take into account low income. I will mention later in the presentation, we're considering expanding that to also include other equity criteria. And over to Matt on facilities plan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Danielle. So moving to the Parks and Recreation Facilities Plan, the Facilities Plan is the council-approved guiding document that supports investment in new and renewed recreation facilities across the city. It was approved by council in 2017, and there was an implementation plan that was approved by council in 2019. It covers thousands of facilities across the city, most notably community recreation centers, ice facilities, outdoor aquatics, sports fields, sport courts and zones, which include things such as basketball courts, skate parks, dogs off leash area, and the like. It is important to note the City of Toronto has over 125 community recreation centers across the city, over 100 indoor and outdoor ice rinks. So it really is guiding the significant investment in these much needed facilities across the city. It's also worth noting that since the approval and implementation strategy for the facilities plan, the city's been working on a number of strategies around other types of facilities, such as cricket, for instance, which will culminate in a cricket strategy that will come forward as the facilities plan comes to council next year. Next slide. The Parks and Recreation Facility Plan has recommendations that are really focused in three key areas. It's important to note that first and foremost out of the facilities plan was recognizing the need to reinvest in existing facilities across the city. Certainly the majority of Toronto residents are using our sort of existing facilities, and it was acknowledged that we need to continue to fund them to ensure that they meet not only the needs of residents now, but in the future. Then we move to gaps within the city, and those are created in two different ways. So the facilities plan identified there were areas of the city geographically that systemically or historically had low access to facilities, and these were identified in the plan, and those would be facilities that are needed as a priority right now. But in addition to that, the city certainly being a city of significant growth, we need to plan ahead. So had a lot of recommendations in the plan to create plans for facilities longer term over 20 years to ensure that facilities are in place when residents grow into the areas in the city. And all of the recommendations from the plan are really focused on equity and ensuring that investment is in the areas of the city where it needs to be. Next slide. So bringing us today, we're seeking the advice and feedback from this committee related to our reviews of these plans. And these plans are being renewed really to reflect a number of very, very important things. So one that we learned certainly through our experience with COVID-19 in the city is that resident needs are constantly changing. So we need to reflect that in new plans that come forward every 5 years. I mentioned the growing population, which is so important. We need to basically make sure that we understand that we are planning in lockstep with where we expect residents to be. Provincial legislation is constantly changing. There have been a number of citywide policy directions that have come from council. Reconciliation Action Plan, Net Zero Strategy, Action Plan to Confront Anti-Black Racism are good examples, and they will provide information to inform our work. It's all about money, and there are a lot of new legislation impacting our ability to fund these facilities, and we need to update our plan to reflect that reality. And then environment and accessibility is so important. We'll be incorporating renewed work from the city to make sure that these facilities are responsive that way. And I do want to make it clear that both from a perspective of the parkland strategy and the facilities plan, we certainly acknowledge that Indigenous engagement within those original plans was insufficient. So I'm hoping that today's presentation reflects the sort of proactive we've taken to ensure that these plans are truly reflective of Indigenous voices. Next slide. So what you see in front of you is the high-level timeline for the Parks and Recreation Facilities Plan. So what you'll see is that we're still very much in the sort of planning stage of the document. We're in our phase 2 of engagement, and we'll speak a little bit more about that shortly. And what that really means is that there's lots of opportunity to continue to input feedback into the process and have that reflected through the final project. We will be reporting to Council next spring with a Parks and Recreation Facilities Plan and Parkland strategy. And it's important to note that the Facilities Plan, again, will have an implementation strategy that will come to the new Council in 2027 for approval. Next slide. So this slide summarizes the engagement that has been to date, certainly with a focus on urban Indigenous communities as well as First Nations, but also will speak to some of the broader engagement as well. The engagement program has been led by a consulting firm called Ridge Road, Haudenosaunee owned and led, based in Toronto, and has really been guiding our urban Indigenous engagement program. So it has included a sort of a significant amount of engagement across the city. So from that perspective, there is an Indigenous advisory circle that was established at the beginning of this work. 4 meetings have been conducted to date, and there will be more meetings. Pop-up consultations at strategic areas around the city, interviews and tours in existing community spaces within parks, youth-focused engagement. We had over 100 responses from residents that identified as being Indigenous to our survey. And as well, we were able to work with the city's employee circle as well. Concurrently with that, there is First Nation engagement ongoing, which was city-led. So there has been outreach to the First Nations identified on the slide, and in bold you'll see a number of First Nations that we have begun the process of meeting with and seeking input through this work. And then, as mentioned, this is in addition to a broad engagement across the city, including surveys, pop-up consultations, public meetings, classroom workshops, that type of thing moving forward. Next slide.
Okay, so Matt talked about who we went and talked to, and we're now going to give you a bit of a summary of what we heard through those conversations. There is a summary available online. We can share a link if anyone wants to read more detail. This slide is a high-level summary of what we've heard. I won't mention everything that's on the slide, but some key points that we heard that's related to parkland from Indigenous communities was about access to water, about the desire for real partnerships between Parks and Rec and Indigenous community groups, and breaking down barriers that could inhibit those partnerships. It's about creating and allowing space for ceremony and gathering, and about supporting Indigenous gardens in park spaces.
Thanks, Danielle. And similarly, from a facilities perspective, we had a lot of input into the process of what we heard, and would like to flag a couple of areas certainly of significance. One thing we heard consistently throughout our engagement is the need to enhance visual representation within our parks and recreation facilities. We heard a lot about hiring and employment and the need to hire Indigenous people at recreation facilities and parks. Also recognize that facilities have a great opportunity to support education and reconciliation through access to space for cultural teachings, activities, languages, and ceremonies, and at the same time provide opportunities for broad community to access the space. From the perspective of safety, while we did hear generally that participants felt safe participating in our facilities, there also was the opportunity to improve accessibility and to enhance experience and usability within facilities. So certainly providing more information about the programs and services provided. And lastly, there is sort of this concept of being able to sort of rethink our community recreation centers and how they're designed to really sort of rebuild and repair Indigenous relationships with the land. So it really is the concept of ensuring that facilities, whether they're new facilities or facilities that we're rebuilding, are really honoring Indigenous knowledge, culture, and history at all levels. And the intention of this, obviously, is to conduct this work very much with Indigenous folks as we advance the work.
Thanks, Matt. So we've taken all of the feedback that we've received, and we're starting to develop potential directions that we're considering making those changes in the parkland strategy. There's not enough time today to get into the details of all of the changes, but I do want to run you through some of the high-level directions that we're considering that you can see on the screen. So we are considering updates to what land gets counted as parkland when we're calculating parkland provision. And this is about a couple of different pieces, including there's some parcels of land where the city does not have ownership, but we have agreements with parties such as hydro. That includes parcels of land like the Meadowway. And so a person who lives next to the Meadowway and is able to use that Meadowway, it feels like parkland to the person who lives adjacent to it. So regardless of the fact that the city does not own that land, we do have a level of control over it, ability to program it. And so we're counting land like that as parkland. And the same also applies to land owned by other levels of government that is parkland, such as Rouge Park. We are updating the vision and guiding principles of the document, and that includes to reflect Indigenous placekeeping in the guiding principles and vision, and also to add and really emphasize the role that parks serve for environmental protection across the city. We are updating or proposing to update the tool that the city uses to decide whether or not to use dedicated funds to buy a specific parcel of land and turn that parcel of land into parkland. And one of the things that we want to add into the assessment tool is consideration for the possibility to acquire land that could support the city achieving Indigenous placekeeping goals and reconciliation. For one of the maps that I showed you that helps us identify where are the priority areas across the city, we are proposing updates to the criteria that go into that map. And it's the 3 bullets that you can see on the bottom of the screen, where the first bullet is about adding in additional equity criteria. So it would not, it would no longer be limited to only looking at which areas are low income. We would also add in considerations such as age, race, Indigenous identity, newcomer status, and language. This is data that we're getting from the census. And we'd also add in a consideration about access to private green space. We know that some areas of the city that are low-rise, single detached houses, those areas have a lot more side yards, backyards, and other areas that are really dense have less access to private green space. So we want to make sure that we're taking that into account and prioritizing areas that have less access to private green space.
Thanks, Danielle. And from a Parks and Recreation Facilities Plan emerging directions, it's important to note that these emerging directions will allow actions to sort of develop that will come under each of these proposed directions as we move forward. And all of those actions have will have the input and the suggestions that we receive throughout this process to ensure that Indigenous communities are included within those actions, and those actions are able to align well. There's four sort of key areas, as mentioned. One very, very clear area is really around maximizing the year-round use of these facilities. And we hear a lot throughout the plan, not just from Indigenous communities around access to space, and certainly recognize that there's an opportunity for us to do more to ensure these facilities are used year-round, morning until night, moving forward. In order to do that, obviously, we have to continue to invest in facilities, maintaining them in a good state of good repair. And we want to basically, upgrade the facilities as well to ensure that they meet the needs of community members. The second area of focus is really taking sort of traditional parks and recreation facilities and spaces and really broadening their ability to serve communities by providing a wider range of community benefits. And certainly from an Indigenous perspective, it's been sort of early on identified that there's a great opportunity through these facilities to work towards reconciliation by working with Indigenous communities to ensure that there's visual representation within the facilities, art, signage, placekeeping, but access to ceremonial spaces is something that's come up very clearly, and you can expect that will be further advanced through our actions coming out of these directions. The third is really around barriers to access and equity. So Danielle was mentioning that both the parkland strategies and the facilities plan are really sort of improving the way that we prioritize equity within this plan, but certainly prioritizing the needs of Indigenous communities is at very much the highest priority when we make decisions about where to invest to improve or upgrade facilities moving forward. Flexible spaces are also so key to these parks and recreation facilities, and ensuring that they're designed in a way really that they can meet community needs now and in the future moving forward. And then lastly, would really like to speak to one of the key directions, which is really around co-location of space. And we have certainly heard very, very clearly, there's a lot of the work at the city going on as well around this space, is that community recreation centers provide a great opportunity to co-locate with aligned community organizations, with school boards, with senior services, newcomer services moving forward. And we really see a strong direction emerging around that moving forward. Next slide.
Thanks. Showing on the screen now some of the emerging themes that have come from our conversations with Indigenous community members through our Phase 1 engagement. And 6 of the themes are shown on the screen here. And these themes are being reviewed, and actions under the theme are being further developed through this Phase 2 engagement. We would be very interested in hearing your thoughts, especially on this slide. We'll do a quick overview of the themes and some of the concepts being considered under them. So theme number 1, visual representation. Some of the feedback that we've heard is about a need for signage that is in Indigenous languages, also signage that shares cultural teachings and storytelling in particular spaces, and original place names as well. And visual representation could also include culturally appropriate art that could support some of that storytelling in spaces. Theme number 2, about ceremonial, cultural, and community spaces. We've heard about requests for powwow spaces in the city. We know that there's a lot of powwows that happen. It can be difficult for organizers to have that space available. About a need for sacred fire spaces that are well known to community and safe spaces. and also about the need for Indigenous community centers or specific Indigenous community spaces in existing community centers. And theme 3 about education and programming. We've heard about a desire for both city-offered Indigenous programming as well as support for community-led Indigenous programming that would happen in city spaces. And also about, on the education side, expanded education for city staff, things like cultural competency, but also for all Torontonians. So education about the Indigenous significance of our park spaces and locations.
Thanks, Danielle. I spoke a bit earlier to employment, but certainly a big theme around employment and economic opportunity has come forward through this work. So certainly this can relate to programming, so programming specific to Indigenous communities. It really is in relation to hiring. So hiring of Indigenous staff for culturally focused programs across the city. This expands to things such as gardening and earth care, as well as supporting Indigenous vendors in parks and recreation spaces is something we heard through this. The fifth theme was around accessibility, and safety. So a couple of themes that have come through this work is around increasing access to land and to waters, and certainly there's sort of very, very strong sort of alignment with that work. Access and affordable access are high priorities in this area. So we heard a lot, not just from indoor facilities, but outdoor spaces such as parkland or even sport fields. The need for sort of equitable access to those, and also that's affordable. And then we even did hear some around just general facility information. So year-round washrooms, for instance, something that comes up a lot within our parks planning. And then the last area is the relationship of land and water. And a lot of the sort of early sort of feedback that has come through this work that has been gathered is really focusing on things such as native plantings. We've heard of food forests, medicine gardens, opportunities around facilities for green roofs has come forward. And having culturally relevant offerings in spaces where Indigenous communities can basically rebuild relationships with land and water through that work is something that's come up. Thank you.
Okay, reaching the end of our presentation, we would love to hear from you following this presentation today. We want to hear your thoughts on the emerging themes, your thoughts on what we've heard from community so far. We are still in this process, so if you have any refinements you think we should make to our process moving forwards, are there organizations we should be connecting with? And if you have additional feedback you're not able to share during today's meeting, our contact information is up on the screen. You can message myself and or Matt, both of us as well are happy to hear everything. Yeah, that concludes the presentation. We thank you very much and we look forward to hearing your feedback now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions on this item? If so, if you could raise your hand or unmute your mic to let me know.
How was it asked?
Hi, Nancy, you had a question? Please go ahead.
Yes, good morning. My question is around the use of space in community centers and within the scope of the project that you're undertaking. I would like to recommend spaces that provide opportunity to develop sports skills, if that is within your mandate.
Thank you very much for the question and feedback. So absolutely, we'll capture that within our work. The design of the Parks and Recreation facilities is truly starts with the needs first, and we've certainly heard about that within it. So certainly our community recreation centers are designed in a way to accommodate those types of activities, but we do know that access is important, so we'll take that forward. Thank you. Through the chair, there was a question in the chat. I'm not sure if that's formal, but I'm happy to answer it if. It's same question. There was reference to arenas sort of specifically, and just want to, while we haven't heard that feedback directly, and we'll absolutely have captured it today, we certainly have heard that in relation to community recreation centers. So thank you.
Are there any other members who have questions?
Chairman, just a question, and maybe it doesn't fit into the recreation facilities, but I've been hearing a lot about reconciliation. I think we all have, but I don't hear anything about the truth. I think we need to know the truth before there's reconciliation. Is there a way that that could be fit under the umbrella of education through that process? Now, when I say about the truth, I'm talking about the residential school that we have heard about and seen and not seen, but just a question. I don't hear anything about the truth part of reconciliation. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's great feedback. I think that this is something that, it's two parts, truth and reconciliation. We can definitely take this back also to our Indigenous Advisory Circle and see what are different ways that we could be incorporating that truth in. I think that it could fit under the theme that you referenced, about that education and when we tell the stories of the spaces. Yeah.
That'd be great. Thank you. Wow. Thank you.
I can just speak to what I put in the chat. It's Paige, Kimmy Sonic Cups. I would recommend, I don't know if you've already reached out to Ojibwakan Indigenous Cultural Network. They do primarily teachings with early years and families, but I know that they oversee a garden at Christie Pits and various locations, Ash Bridges Park. So I think they're a really good way to connect and make sure the space is culturally grounded. And I think Laura Southers actually, who runs Ojibwakan, she is part of this committee. Yeah, thank you.
That's great feedback. We have been working with our Indigenous engagement consultants to reach out to a number of organizations. I'm not 100% sure if we reached out, but it sounds like there'd be good alignment. So actually, thank you for flagging that.
Francis, please go ahead. Francis, your mic is off. Go ahead, Francis. Oh, I still can't hear. Francis, I'm sorry, we can't hear you. Francis, do you want to write it into the chat? Just because I think you're muted on your end.
There's mute on the computer that you have to actually unmute in WebEx. They don't usually sync up. So if you're unmuted on your computer but muted on WebEx, they both need to be unmuted.
We're just going to try and call her. One moment. Okay, Francis, if you want to. Okay.
Sorry to stop the meeting.
There we go. Go ahead, Francis.
With all these recreational places that you're opening, is there a space for entrepreneurial creativity to start like a snack bar or some kind of refreshment booth for people when they do go to these sporting, you know, when they're going to play ice hockey or they're going to play softball, soccer, cricket, whatever, that there's an opportunity for a creative young person to start an entrepreneurial business in partnership with the recreation center.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Francis. Absolutely. I earlier in the presentation made reference to the outdoor spaces and the opportunities that exist there. But consistently, the need to sort of rethink community recreation centers and the role specifically of food within recreation centers has come up across the board, both from a food security perspective, but also from an opportunity to provide those type of entrepreneurial opportunities. So certainly, I'll capture your feedback from today, but be assured that we have heard that as well.
Miigwech. Is there anybody else who wanted to speak to this? Ask any questions?
Thank
you. So that's all members. Are there any speakers to this item online? Hearing no further speakers, do I have a motion to receive this item for information? Thank you, Richard. All those in favor? Carries. Miigwech.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next item is AA 8.3, an update of Downsview Project Indigenous Community Resource Group. Kate McMillan, Assistant Planner, Strategic Initiatives, City Planning Division, is here to give a presentation to the committee. Welcome, Kate.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Okay, great. Well, thank you for having us back. I'm joined today by my colleague, Sundis Balata. She's on the screen, as well as our consultant, Roxanne Copway. And we'll be talking today to follow up about the Downsview Indigenous Community Resource Group. So we spoke to the AAAC on July 29th to introduce our Indigenous engagement approach, including this advisory committee. And you were interested in hearing more about the application process and how we've selected members. So we're following up today to give more details around how we released the applications and then how we selected members, as well as share a little bit about the terms of reference that we'll be bringing forward to the advisory committee. So I'll pass it to Sundus to introduce herself, and then Roxanne.
Bonjour, my name is Sundus Balata. I'm a project manager with the City of Toronto. I work for the Social Development Division and I lead the Downsview Community Development Plan. I'll pass it to Roxanne.
Anine, good morning everyone. My name is Roxanne Copboy. I'm the technical advisor for Cambium Indigenous Professional Services. I'm a member of Curve Lake First Nation, and I'm happy to be here today to discuss the very important Indigenous Community Resource Group. Language.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sundus and Roxanne. I'm going to share some slides. Okay. Oops. So today we'll be giving just a brief overview of the project, just to sort of refresh as to what we're talking about with the Downsview project. Then Roxanne is going to quickly go through the terms of reference, because there was some questions last time about what we would do in the case that some members can no longer attend, if we would replace them or not, as well as the sort of governance structure and what the responsibilities or the role of the advisory committee is. Then we're also going to talk about the application process, the membership selection, and then the next steps. So our first meeting with the Downsview Indigenous Community Resource Group is tomorrow. And we have some questions also for you around how sort of collectively we envision the AAAC and the Downsview ICRG working together. So as a refresher, this is the Downsview site. It's the former airport lands. And the Update Downsview project is a master planning and redevelopment project. So these lands that you see on the right side of the screen are going to be redeveloped into 15 new neighborhoods that will be a mix of housing, community services, employment, retail, all sorts of land uses and buildings. And the vision for this site is to build a resilient, sustainable, equitable, and complete community. So that's sort of the basis of our engagement strategy. And as a city, we're also working with the major property owners. So this site is majority owned by two property owners, which is Canada Lands Company and Northcrest Developments. And we're working very closely with them for their planning applications, but also collectively doing community and Indigenous engagement together. This we talked about a little bit last time, but just as a reminder, these are our different engagement groups. So we have 3 Indigenous engagement streams. At the top in purple, you'll see First Nations rights holders, and we're having one-on-one meetings with each of the different First Nations rights holders who have interests in this area. We also have the Downsview Indigenous Community Resource Group, which is what we're talking about today, and that's an advisory committee. We have 16 members representing urban Indigenous community members. And then we also have Indigenous sharing meetings, so those are more of like an open town hall, which will be open to any urban Indigenous community members living in Toronto. Usually we have about 50 people attend those meetings. And then on the other side for community engagement, we have sort of the traditional community consultation meetings, which are like a public town hall or open house. And then we also have a community resource group, which is another advisory group representing Black and other equity deserving organizations and community members. We have 33 people who sit on that group. And then we have another advisory committee, which is the Community Advisory Committee, and that's specific to the Downsview Community Recreation Center. So that's really focused on one part of the Downsview project. And I'll pass it to Sundus if you'd like to add anything and to continue with the presentation.
Thanks, Kate. It's really important to just note that as part of the Downsview Secondary Plan, one of our goals is to achieve equitable outcomes for Indigenous, Black, and equity deserving groups. And so through the secondary plan, through the urban design guidelines, and through what is very, very new for the city, something called the Community Development Plan, we've locked in Indigenous placekeeping and Indigenous placemaking. So it was really helpful to follow sort of the parks conversation that was previous, because a lot of the 6 themes that the Parks and Recreation staff spoke to are a lot of the themes that we've heard from community are really important, and we've been able to lock in through the planning process. Next slide. So through our engagement with focus groups, so we had focus groups with women, Two-Spirit, youth, and elders, we heard that as part of the implementation of the Downsview Community Development Plan, we really need to have a group that we could engage with and that could provide advice on a continuous basis. And so that is the genesis behind the Indigenous Community Resource Group. So this is a brand new advisory committee that will be supporting Downsview's redevelopment, which is 30 plus years, 15 districts, and just a ton of opportunities to really build communities that are focused and grounded in truth and reconciliation. And so that committee is made up right now of 16 members who represent the diversity of the nations, genders, ages, as well as their community roles. So the roles that they play in their social location, because it's really important for them to come with different expertise and different lenses to support this redevelopment. We expect that the ICRG will provide feedback on a number of areas, but the critical pieces are housing. So what type of housing should we have? The range of housing, and then community services and facilities. So the facilities that sort of support a thriving community, employment and economic opportunities, as well as entrepreneurial opportunities. So that was one of the questions that came up in the previous agenda item, and we've locked in a lot of actions around entrepreneurial support, parks and open spaces. So when we're designing the park spaces, when we're designing POP spaces, so privately owned, publicly accessible spaces, what does that really look like, and how do we engage the Indigenous community to create an active and welcoming public realm specifically to the Indigenous community? And what does that storytelling look like? So we have actions there in the community development plan. And then your rec facilities, so the recreation centers, how do we create spaces for the Indigenous community within these recreation facilities? And then of course, streets and transportation, which is all part of the public realm. And then I'm going to turn it over to Roxanne, and she can walk us through the terms of reference and the selection process.
Perfect. Thank you, Sundus. Thank you, Kate, for providing some overview and information regarding the front end of the project. We have drafted the Indigenous Community Resource Group terms of reference that will be reviewed by the members tomorrow, as Kate indicated. The background of the terms of reference. This Indigenous Community Resource Group is being convened by the City of Toronto, Northcrest Developments, and Canada Lands Company. It will provide urban Indigenous-led dialogue, community input, and culturally grounded guidance for the redevelopment of Downsview, specifically as it relates to the Downsview District Plans, Community Development Plan, Parks and Recreational Spaces that Sundus had briefly explained. The Indigenous engagement will be facilitated by our company, Cambium Indigenous Professional Services. We are located in the Williams Treaty, Curve Lake. We are Indigenous owned, operated, and employed. The ICRG will uphold principles of respect, self-determination, and relationship building. It will provide a forum to ensure that Indigenous perspectives, rights, and knowledge systems are meaningfully reflected in planning and development processes. So the City of Toronto, North Crest Developments, and Canada Lands Company meet separately with the First Nation rights holders, as Kate did indicate, on one-on-one with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Six Nations of the Grand River, and the Wendat Nation. Regularly obtaining clear guidance and support decision-making, representatives from Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Six Nations of the Grand River, and the Wendat Nation will be invited to all ICRG meetings. First Nations and urban Indigenous engagement is a core principle of the Downs View Community Development Plan, and it is embedded in the overarching goals of the Downs View Secondary Plan. So that's a bit of a background. This is what will be guiding forward. This comes into our mandate. So what are we going to do? So the support, so the RCOG is to support and design the implementation of actions under the priority areas of the Downs View Community Development Plan, support Indigenous inclusion, cultural safety, and visibility with the district plans and related development applications, support the design of the parks, open spaces, and community recreational facilities, champion broader Indigenous engagement, events, and ceremonies as appropriate. Promote capacity building and intergenerational knowledge sharing among participants and Indigenous communities. Advise on and support the planning for Indigenous-led operations and maintenance of place-keeping elements and/or land stewardship opportunities. The ICRG will also advise on or contribute to IPPs, the Indigenous Participation Plans and Community Benefit Strategies, cultural protocol integration, Indigenous economic development, employment and training opportunities, reconciliation action plan implementation related to the project. So membership, the ICRG will include 16 representatives from First Nations with historic and/or contemporary ties to the territories, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Six Nations of the Grand River, and the Wendat Nation, Métis organizations, urban Indigenous organizations, elders, youth, women, Two-Spirit people, and knowledge keepers and community advocates, Indigenous business and cultural leaders, Indigenous service providers, artists, educators, and professionals. Membership aims to reflect a balance of voices across nations, geographies, on and off, reserve, rural, and urban, ages, and gender identity. Organization may appoint 2 representatives, so 1 primary, 1 alternative, and community members may also participate individually. Participation is voluntary and based on mutual respect and shared responsibility. Should the membership drop below 12, the conveners and facilitation support team will launch an application invitation process. Terms and the meetings. So the term of the ICRG will be 1 year with the possibility of renewal. The meetings will be held approximately every 2 months with flexibility to meet more or less frequently based on the community priorities and project timelines. So from now till December, we will be meeting every 4 weeks and then switching from January onwards to every 6 to 8 weeks. The proposed meeting format is a 2-hour circle-based discussion, presentations, and plannings. All meetings will be held virtually. So we're going to walk into the roles and responsibilities of the ICRG members. They will share advice grounded in community priorities, lived experience, and Indigenous ways of knowing, communicate to and from their nations or organizations, champion engagement with typically underrepresented populations, youth, elders, Two-Spirit people, uphold cultural protocols and support the respectful exchange of knowledge, review materials in advance and contribute to shaping agendas and discussions, attend meetings or send alternates, and provide notice if unavailable. The responsibilities of The conveners, so that is the City of Toronto, Northcrest Developments, Canada Lands Company, will provide timely, transparent updates and share relevant materials, respect and uphold Indigenous rights, values, and protocols, invite guests or specialists based on member input, respond meaningfully to ICRG input into project planning. So the facilitation support team, which includes myself and my colleagues from Cambium Indigenous Professional Service, we will develop culturally appropriate agendas and summaries, invite members to meetings and provide meeting materials 1 week in advance of meetings, support consensus building and respectful discussion, maintain a transparent record of feedback and recommendations and circulate to members and conveners for revisions before finalizing, offer orientation sessions on project background and Indigenous engagement practices, and we will be dispersing the honoraria. Elders and knowledge keepers will provide opening and closing for the initial meeting to ensure engagements proceed in a good way. Honoraria, there will be, is provided at $125 per meeting, and that will be provided to individuals participating in the scheduled meetings and will be dispersed via check, e-transfer, or telepay. The approach to decision making. So the ICRG is an advisory body, not a decision-making authority. Meeting summaries will reflect areas of consensus, diverse views, and any key recommendations. The goal is to build understanding and influence decisions through respectful collaboration. Treaty and rights holders. Mississauga of the Credit First Nation, Sixth Nation of the Grand River, and the Wendat Nation. They will be invited to participate in all ICRG meetings. However, with the understanding that these forums do not replace formal consultation or nation-to-nation engagement process. Ending of the ICRG. So the ICRG will remain active as long as it is valued by its members and conveners. Members may withdraw at any time. A decision at the end of the group will be made in consultation with all members. We did add a media inquiry here. If any members of the ICRG are approached by the media, it will be the City of Toronto's responsibility, and all inquiries must be directed to the conveners or facilitation support team. And our contact information here for myself and for Kate McMillan with the City of Toronto. So that concludes a very brief overview of the terms of reference. This is going to be presented with feedback to the ICRG group tomorrow evening for feedback. And we just wanted to provide you with the terms of reference for transparency and knowledge sharing. It was a really dry session, so I apologize in that being a 5-pager, but we're going to be heading into the application process because I know that there has been voices that are wanting to have more information. So the invitations were sent by email with a monkey survey link to it. The invitations were sent to past Downsview Urban Indigenous Focus Group participants. Additional businesses and organizations were added by our company, SIPS, the AAAC chair and vice chair, as well as the executive director of TASSC to share to their networks. So over, I believe, 100 individuals or more, and as individuals and organizations, we received 30 applications. The application process was open from July 23rd to August the 15th. The application, the membership selection process was a quantitative matrix inclusive of the following markers of gender identity, Indigenous identity, age range, and community roles. Written responses and filled gaps as well. So from August the 29th meeting, the AAAC did mention and suggests we include youth at, well, not, well, they suggested that we include youth, community advocate, housing providers, and someone with legal policy background. We did have these suggestions included in our selection process. There was gaps identified after the quantitative matrix applicant scores, and they were male representation and Métis. So we were to alleviate those gaps, we selected male representation along with Métis, which brought us to the 16 participants that were selected. So the 16 members that were selected for the ICRG membership, they include one Inuk member, 2 Métis people, and 13 First Nations from the following 11 communities that you see on your screen. We have 12 women, 4 men, 1 Two-Spirit person, 1 LGBTQIA+ person, 3 youth, 10 adults, 3 seniors, and various community roles within, which include 3 elders, 5 knowledge keepers, 11 Indigenous community leaders, 8 Indigenous service providers, 3 business leaders, 5 cultural leaders, 4 artists, 2 educators, 9 professionals, 2 students, and 8 community citizens. So that concludes my my section of the presentation. So I'm going to shoot it back to, I believe, Kate for the next steps.
Thanks, Roxanne. Yeah, so we hope that answers some questions, and we're happy to talk about the terms of reference or the application process and the membership selection. As mentioned before, the first meeting is going to be tomorrow night, held virtually. And then moving forward, we're going to be having meetings about every 6 to 8 weeks until December 31st, 2027. Until this December, we're going to be meeting more regularly, about every month, just to sort of catch up on the project. And then discussion today, we're hoping to hear your feedback about the application process and the membership selection process. I know it was sort of quick from our last meeting, so we're interested to hear, I guess, how you felt that, like, your feedback on the processes, but also if the AAAC is interested in being involved in other, like, selection processes for other advisory committees. And then also how you see the ICRG and the AAAC interacting. So we did have 2 members from the AAAC apply for the Downsview ICRG, and they have been selected to sit on that group. So we'd be interested to hear, like, if you think they should have a liaison role, or how you envision that relationship being, as well as any other questions you might have. Thank you.
Are there any members who have questions?
Can you take the presentation down? Can you take the presentation down?
Oh, yes, sorry, I'll take the presentation down.
Thank you. Okay. Please go ahead, Crystal.
I think with any advisory council, we need to, as a committee, be prepared to kind of sort of have check boxes that when we are receiving this information, what are we doing with it as a council? What boxes does it check for us in terms of our terms of reference and what we want to be involved in and how we want to guide these projects coming to our table? I love that there are members of the AAAC. I too have my experience joining one of these advisories in the previous presentation. It has taught me a lot about my role and responsibility that I play on task and AAAC. And I encourage that we use one of these as an example to educate ourselves and really formalize our approach as a council on what kind of involvement and what our outcomes are and what we want our outcomes to be in these engagements. And so having members from the AAAC be on these councils, I think is beneficial, but also us having active discussions in our agendas about what we want to achieve being consulted with in these. You know, I learned a lot this coming past couple of weeks about my role on my advisory council and kind of the responsibilities that I bear, making sure that my participation is led with relationship building and capacity dollars and how we come to each other and asking for engagement and consultation with the Indigenous community, nation to nation building, and how we place the community's involvement and placement in these engagements where we want them to be. Because there are a lot of outcomes that you've listed in your terms of reference that you want to achieve. There are a lot. And I think identifying the gaps in your membership is your very first task, and making sure that if you have a housing gap, that you intentionally move forward in finding that right person. I'm in housing, but I'm also on another advisory committee, so I don't want to stretch myself. But you know, I'm saying that as an example, throwing myself out there, because I think it's very valuable when you're designing space and one of your goals is housing. What does that look like for Indigenous communities and people? It's not engaging in builders that are going to build condos that are going to be unattainable and unreachable for our Indigenous community to live in those homes. So I think there's real value in identifying those gaps and making sure you have intentional steps to fill them, one. And two, how our committee brings forth our participation in these presentations and what we can offer and how we want to achieve outcomes in them too, right? Otherwise, we're just check boxing things. Met with AAAC, check, right? And we don't want it to be empty. We want it to be fruitful. And that's why we have this committee and that's why we have tasks. And so my feedback to you as well as our council here is that we have maybe more intentional understandings and approaches to these coming out of these engagements.
Miigwech Crystal.
Sorry, to be clear, my feedback to this advisory engagement is that we intentionally fill those gaps with those things that you have to put in that extra effort to fill them. Because the last thing you want to do is put all your work together and then be criticized on that one piece of housing that you didn't intentionally fill that gap for. So just really, and housing is a really big one there.
Yeah.
That you have a really good opportunity because Downsview is centrally located in the GTA. So how does that work? What's happening in the Indigenous urban landscape right now in terms of access to space that you can mirror your goals and outcomes to that filling that gap with your project, right? Centrally located, you already have a power that exists there that uses that space. So how do you build off of that placemaking, right? And so aligning those goals, I think, is really going to be key on how you use the advantage of being centrally located in the GTA and serving the Indigenous community in ways that it serves them and not serves your engagement or consultation as a checkbox mark for the context.
Thanks, Crystal. Yeah, I think that's really great feedback. And that was something I think we heard from the AAAC last meeting, was that housing was a really big priority for you that we should have represented on this committee. And so that was something we were thinking about when we went through the applications. And it was between, I think it was like 2 or 3 people, and then we looked more at their qualitative response because we had a few questions asking for people to provide their background and if they represented an organization, who that was. So that really strengthened one person's response. They represented Wigwamin housing providers, and so that sort of boosted their, I guess, score, if you called it that, but it wasn't really a score, but boosted them on our list. And so that ultimately led them to being included on our committee. So we do have that representation. I guess we should have said that those gaps that we had on the slides, we went through all of those and identified them and then added people who filled those identities. So we do have those representatives now, but we didn't receive applications from multiple housing providers. So that, you know, in the future, that is a shortfall that maybe we could more strategically reach out to different organizations or groups and hopefully have more than one application from different groups of people. Yeah. Thank you, Crystal.
Are there any other members who wish to speak? Seeing no members that wish to speak, I Do I have a motion to receive the item for information? Thank you, Paige. All those in favor? Carries. Miigwech. Our next item is AA 8-4, a presentation from the City Manager's Office with response to item 2025 EX 21.14. We're going to begin with a presentation on this item, and then we'll hear from any registered public speakers before moving it back to the committee. Amira Mohammed, Senior Corporate Management Policy Consultant, Governance and Corporate Strategy from the City Manager's Office, is here to give a presentation to the committee. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. It's nice to see everyone again gathered, and a special shout out to Francis. Nice to see you joining us again today. I think those are most on the call and in the room are familiar with who I am, but for those who don't know me, my name is Amira Mohammed. I am a Senior Corporate Management Policy Consultant in the City Manager's Office. I am joined here by my colleague Vanessa Ferron, and she will introduce herself later on. I will be doing going through the presentation, item 8.4 on the agenda, and that is the City Manager's Office response to the Executive Committee motions made in March. So that is EX 21.14, and we are coming back to the committee now to build on previous updates on this work. So I'll get started. So as a reminder for the committee, these are the executive committee motions that our office has been putting together, or has put together a work plan and is responding to. So I'll go through them very quickly. So in March, the item was referred to the city manager by the executive committee, and they requested that the city manager consider opportunities to deepen meaningful representation of the Indigenous community in city decision-making, including through existing channels such as the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee and in alignment with the city's Reconciliation Action Plan. And then B was to undertake a scan of Canadian orders of government and measures taken to increase Indigenous civic input and representation, including through advisory bodies and other mechanisms. So what we have here is our updated work plan, and the committee would have seen this previously. And so where we are at today is phase 2 in the middle of the diagram there. We are delivering our findings analysis from phase 1. So phase 1 included research and planning, specifically a current state assessment of the current existing channels and methods of Indigenous representation in the City of Toronto decision-making model. A literature review where we analyzed published materials on Indigenous civic engagement, and a jurisdictional scan, of course, which examined approaches across Canadian jurisdictions and levels of government to enhance Indigenous input. And then just a flag about phase 3 there. We'll be going into a bit more detail on that in the later slides in the presentation. And that is a proposed engagement plan to round out the information that we have been collecting here. So we'll go into more detail on that. So to begin, we just wanted to go over our findings from the current state assessment at the City of Toronto. So this slide indicates our key findings and some examples of the key findings through the research that we did. And so what we have along the top are some of the buckets in terms of the major mechanisms and methods in which we see the Indigenous community engaged in decision-making at the City of Toronto. And so starting from the left side of the graphic here, we saw a great deal of consultation and engagement. And so this took the form of community engagement sessions, sharing circles, steering committees, advisory bodies to staff, and methods like this. An example of that we are sharing is the Scarborough Bluffs West project. And so we're using this as an example to show sort of a typical consultation approach that the city follows for city processes. So this would be an environmental assessment in which consultation requirements are outlined by the province, and the city engages and consults with the outlined First Nations as indicated by the province. In terms of other examples, we saw a lot of collaboration, partnerships, and co-development. And so some examples include memorandums of understanding, collaboration between the city and Indigenous organizations in RFP processes, co-development of certain city processes, and partnerships with Indigenous organizations in the delivery of programs and services. So one example includes an MOU with the Toronto Indigenous Community Advisory Board, so TCAB, that I'm sure many are familiar with. And this was an example of an agreement in which there were guiding principles for engagement and Indigenous partners at the planning stage, ensuring they're involved in planning and implementation as Indigenous service experts, and are involved as equal partners. And then towards the right of the graphic, we have examples, or what we found were a lot of examples, or a few examples of representation mechanisms and models that support self-determination. So in terms of representation mechanisms, we saw advisory bodies to council, like this one, the Indigenous Affairs Office is an example as well, representation on public boards, procurement of Indigenous consultants, architects, businesses, et cetera, and designated Indigenous staff and recruitment. And so we have some examples at the bottom there. Obviously, this body is an example of a way in which the community is represented in decision-making, and in particular, taking a different approach to have to support this committee in reviewing its own terms of reference, and that is being completed by task, of course. In terms of self-determination, we saw there are quite a few funding models and grants programs that support self-determination by having the Indigenous community determine their own funding priorities. There are plans and frameworks designed by the Indigenous community as well, and memorandums of understanding with First Nations in early development. So one example there of a funding model, take what you need, leave what you don't, funding pilot. So some may be familiar with this already as well, and that includes Indigenous organizations being able to share funds and use them in an unrestricted way. We wanted to outline, as part of the current state assessment, the legislative and regulatory frameworks that sort of guide the ways in which the community can be engaged in some respects. So we wanted to show, when speaking about representation, so on public boards or on city council, there are provincial pieces of provincial legislation that outline and define the composition and structure of city council and of the Toronto Police Service Board, which the committee heard about in an earlier presentation this year. And in terms of when we speak about consultation, there are provincial, there is provincial legislation and regulations that outline consultation requirements with the Indigenous community as part of multiple processes undertaken at the city. So for example, archaeological assessments and environmental assessments, as I mentioned on the earlier slide. In terms of the jurisdictional scan, this slide covers the scope of the scan. And so we focused on the buckets to the left of the graphic here. And these were areas of interest that we heard from the committee. And then the JSCAN was expanded following the last meeting to include a few more cities, as we heard the feedback from the committee. And so we covered quite a breadth of jurisdictions in this scan. In terms of the key findings, if we go by these buckets here that we outlined in our scope, we did find in terms of, for example, starting with the public boards, no jurisdictions included in this scan required Indigenous representation. But we did find that some jurisdictions have amended bylaws or requested legislative amendments to increase Indigenous representation. So for example, we saw this in Thunder Bay with their Social Services Administration Board that submitted a request to the Ontario Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services to amend their act to allow designated Indigenous representation. And there are a few other similar examples to that effect. With advisory bodies, we saw that 8 municipalities have Indigenous advisory bodies who can influence policy and decision making through recommendations to City Council and advice to staff. They seem to have varying degrees of influence in policy and decision making. An example includes Calgary Aboriginal Urban Affairs Committee, who is authorized to investigate Indigenous concerns and created the Indigenous policy and framework to guide municipal planning and decision making. And there are a couple other examples as well that were like this. In terms of representation on council or the relevant governing body of that jurisdiction, we saw that in Ontario, there are elected officials who identify as Indigenous. We did see that current provincial legislation sort of across the board seems to limit the ability to pursue designated seats on councils from the jurisdictions that were included in this review. While there has been, we saw that there was a lot of discussion in the jurisdictions of having a dedicated Indigenous seat and some interest in pursuing possibilities around that. There were no formal requests to amend provincial legislation that we saw, but we did hear back from the City of Halifax after these slides were posted. They did confirm that they have submitted a request to their province to have a dedicated Mi'kmaq seat on their council, and that they just have not heard back from the province. So there is one example that we did learn of. In terms of bylaw review and development, we did see that across the board, there does not seem to be a formal decision-making authority in bylaw review or development processes in these jurisdictions. There are avenues through which Indigenous communities can provide input into the bylaw review and development process. So through dedicated Indigenous advisory bodies, direct engagement and consultation processes by jurisdictions, and dedicated municipal offices, Indigenous municipal offices, excuse me. We also did find through the research that there are other approaches worth noting as well. So there are policies, formal agreements, and guiding documents in many cases based on treaties as well. So for example, MOUs, accords, frameworks, strategic action plans. These strengthen the grounds, pathways, and processes for the Indigenous community to meaningfully participate in municipal processes. And an example includes Vancouver, with their UNDRIP strategy and their UNDRIP action plan developed in collaboration and in partnership between the city and 3 First Nations. But we did find quite a few examples of strengthened relationships through these formal agreements and policies and frameworks. To provide a bit of information on the literature review findings, this slide summarizes sort of the key themes that we found through this exercise. So we saw through the research that there was a lot of commentary on the unique experience of urban Indigenous peoples and essentially Indigenous peoples living in cities. So as many probably already know, over 50% of Indigenous people live in urban areas, and they can face unique challenges as a result of that in terms of representation, service provision, and recognition of their rights and cultures. The literature provided commentary around a need to address systemic racism, historical injustice, structural inequities, and the colonial legacy legacies. So we saw that colonial frameworks continue to produce health and policy inequities, as many are already aware. In terms of the legal frameworks, as I mentioned earlier, they're important to note because municipalities often and increasingly play roles in the consultation processes delegated by provinces. But the literature revealed that there is a need for municipalities to move beyond minimal legal compliance and embrace more transformative relationships with Indigenous peoples. In terms of another theme, we saw that with regards to municipal responsibilities and opportunities, municipalities play a unique role due to the local governance model. They influence land use, housing, social services, and cultural heritage. And so these are all areas that have a major impact on Indigenous peoples. And so the municipalities are well positioned to lead reconciliation efforts due to their proximity to these communities. Frameworks like the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and UNDRIP offer guidance for municipalities to engage meaningfully with Indigenous communities and guidance on co-developing governance models that reflect mutual respect and shared responsibility. And then we did see through the literature review a focus on different types of governance models for the municipal context. So the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples actually proposes 2 models, and this was from 1996, but proposes 2 models for the municipal context to strengthen Indigenous representation in decision-making. And one of these was to reform urban government and public authorities. So municipalities, as stated through the report, should ensure Indigenous representation on decision-making bodies and establish Aboriginal affairs committees and co-manage urban initiatives with Indigenous communities. And there's a community of interest model that was proposed, which encourages voluntary associations of urban Indigenous organizations and supports greater Indigenous political autonomy through coordinated service delivery and advocacy. And another theme related to this that did come through the literature review as well was the importance of also focusing on Indigenous governance models. So the Truro Wampum Belt is an example. And those are reflected as guiding frameworks through a lot of these other frameworks like the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And so, yes, a need to focus on those as well. And so given all these inputs, we wanted to summarize what our summary considerations were coming out of this exercise. And so this slide here sort of depicts our key findings or our conclusions coming out of what we learned through this research. And that is that Indigenous representation in decision-making at the municipal level can often be viewed through a spectrum where towards the left of this graphic here, you see consultation and engagement as sort of the area where most municipalities have been very active. There has been a lot of consultation and engagement approaches, and we saw this through our current state assessment, that it is a very common approach to engage with the Indigenous community on many processes, policy development, and practices at the city. As we go towards the right of the graphic here, so we saw that there's increasing impact on decision-making when the methods followed include collaboration, partnership, and co-development. We see representation mechanisms and models that support self-determination. And so given what we learned through also the literature review, it seems that consultation engagement, very sort of established practices, common approaches followed. We are seeing more of an evolving space in which collaboration and partnership, co-development, representation, and methods for self-determination supporting that are emerging. And so as we saw through the literature review, there's a need for focusing more towards the right of this graphic, but not to diminish, of course, the importance of consultation and engagement. So it is sort of a spectrum, and we're seeing a move towards, or what we learned through the research was the need and actual practice in municipalities and jurisdictions of moving towards the right of the document here. And so we've outlined some examples of these approaches in the buckets below, which sort of reiterates what we did go through in the current state assessment already. And of course, very importantly, the guiding frameworks and principles that sort of flow across these that really answer the question of why. The unique position of the Indigenous peoples on this land and the need to respect the treaties through the Constitution Act and all these other frameworks and guiding documents that give us our frameworks and our approaches to engaging with the Indigenous community. And yes, so moving on, we wanted to propose an engagement plan, as mentioned earlier in the slides, to round out this information and to ensure, as we say here, to ensure that a diverse representation of voices from the Indigenous community are included on this topic. And so we've heard a lot of feedback from the community over the years on the best ways to engage and the importance of engaging. What this response is proposing is to get a little more information on, if you look at that right side of the spectrum. So how can we, and considering the literature review as well, how can we move a bit more to that side? What would the community want to see there? What are the expectations and what are the thoughts of the nations and the urban Indigenous organizations on this? And of course, everyone plays a very important role in all the voices. We want to ensure all the voices are included in that. And so we're hoping to co-develop this engagement plan with all of you. We're estimating 2 to 3 months to co-develop this plan, and then timing following that to execute the plan would be dependent on what the committee decides here. And that would probably take place in the new year, but we are hoping, and as a first start, what we were proposing and thinking about was engagement with the urban Indigenous community. So of course that would include TASK and others, and we hope to co-develop this with TASK as well. And find ways to, of course, reach the Indigenous community where they are, using guiding documents like the engagement toolkit that, of course, TASK provided to guide these kinds of approaches. In addition to that, we were thinking, of course, as mentioned, outreach and relationship building with the First Nations to ensure their voices are included in this work and to round out, of course, our office's response to this. And so we are anticipating this could be led by the city. And we would want to hear from the committee on who should be included in that. What are the committee's thoughts and expectations in terms of the nations that should be consulted and included in this, as well as the urban Indigenous community groups. So maybe I'll pause there. We can really quickly just show the committee here the timeline that we're proposing for this work. And then we can hear some feedback on the engagement plan, hopefully, but this just reiterates the timing I was discussing. So yeah, maybe I'll pause there. Thank you for listening, and I'll pass it back to the chair. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before we proceed to questions from members or observations, we're going to hear from our registered public speakers. I'd ask the clerk to confirm that our first speaker is ready to proceed. Okay. Our speaker is Miguel Avila, my apologies, Velarde. You'll have 5 minutes to speak. When you're getting close to the end of your time, I will let you know. Please.
1 second, please. Let me set up my laptop. Can you see my laptop? Yeah, it's plugged in, yeah. Sorry, apologies, technical difficulties. While they fix that, maybe I should start by introducing myself. Hi, so I have a little...
One moment, because I'm going to start the time when you start.
Okay.
So if you
No,
wanna
well, let's wait for him. Maybe it takes... Okay, there you go.
Okay, there we go. Please go ahead.
All right. So my name is Miguel. I'm indigenous from South America, the First Nations people of the Andes of South America, from Peru. I'm here to speak about an initiative that is started by the Indigenous Affairs Office with INAGIP. INAGIP and the Indigenous Affairs Office have undertaken a very important initiative to recruit members of the indigenous youth community. On the screen, you can see that there is the creation of an indigenous youth fellowship that will work. Young people will start to work with city councilors to understand, to learn the things that happen behind the curtains, behind the doors at city hall meetings, to training and how to become one day leaders. Sometimes, who knows, someone will run to be a mayor, who knows, someone will be the next mayor of Toronto and indigenous people of Turtle Island. Back in 2014, when City Hall had 44 city councilors, we created something similar. We started to hire youth from the community because at the time there was a strong movement to change social systems for the Black community in particularly. The Black Lives Matters movement was created in 2013, I believe, and when Ralph Ford was mayor, there was a push to bring social changes. So when Ralph Ford was mayor, he was confronted with new youth, new blood, new people with brand new ideas, and as a result of that, the creation of the anti-Black racism strategy. And now that's what we have today, voices for indigenous people. So hopefully with this Indigenous Youth Fellowship, one day we can create an anti-indigenous racism strategy that is very needed in the city of Toronto. So I want to thank again the Indigenous Affairs Office for the creation of this youth fellowship that will provide some stipends for your contributions. I wish that was something available for me when I started 15 years ago. I've been doing this job for the last 15 years for free. Nada, gratis. But anyway, everybody needs an uncle. So if you are youth, if you want to join the City Hall crew, come and talk to me. And I can show you who is here in this room. For instance, I know all the players in the room, and then we can have a better conversations and bring forward truth with reconciliation that is badly needed. And I feel very happy about this because right now the voice of indigenous people is missing. Here at City Hall, the Toronto Police Services Board and other agencies that are important to change the system. The initiative hopefully will create meaningful job opportunities that will give a platform for young people to become leaders. That's the hope. So that what you heard today from the consultants, how we can have representation at City Council, this is a good beginning, that we can begin to train future leaders to bring forward changes, systemic changes that is so important at City Council. And that is all I had to say today in regards to this topic. And thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. Do any committee members have a question for the speaker?
I see that no one has any questions for the speaker, so thank you, Miguel, for your remarks to the committee today. Committee members, do you have any questions towards the presentation that was given? Nancy, if you'd like to speak.
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that it seems like we don't have anybody else who wishes to speak on this item. So if I can have a motion to accept this for consideration? Sorry, for information. Thank you, Paige. All those in favor? Motion carries. Miigwech. Our next item is AA 8.5, the meeting schedule for 2026. A proposed meeting schedule has been suggested by the City Manager's Office and City Clerk's Office. 3 meetings for 2026, spaced approximately 8 weeks apart. Those dates are January 29th at 9:30 a.m., April 21st at 9:30 a.m., and June 3rd at 9:30 a.m. Does the committee accept the proposed meeting schedule? Are there any speakers on this item? There have been no comments made, so I'll make a motion to accept these dates for the 2026. Sorry, Suzanne, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm confused. The first date, did you say January 28 or 29?
29.
29? Okay. I thought I saw an email that said 28, but that's okay. Thank you.
Miigwech, I make a motion that we accept these 3 dates. All those in favor? Carries. Miigwech. Our next item is AA 8.6, the City Manager's Office staff update on action items and agenda planning. We have a presentation from Vanessa Ferrone, Director, Governance and Corporate Strategy, City Manager's Office.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. Oh, can everyone hear me okay? Yes, okay. I'm a little bit short. I can't get to the microphone. Okay. So my name is Vanessa Ferrone. I am the Acting Director of Governance and Corporate Strategy in the City Manager's Office, and I will be going through this presentation with my colleague, Amira. So what we have on this slide are the action items that the committee has asked us to track. So previous items or requests of the committee or motions that have come from council. So we'll just give you the status update on each of one of these. The first one is the terms of reference review with task. So that task has been engaged for those services, and we expect to have an update on that at the next meeting, which you'll see in the proposed agenda later on in this deck. The second item, updated member bios. So as we discussed at the last meeting, the updated bios of the committee members have been collected from the majority of the members and are now posted on the city's website. If you have any changes or you'd like your bio to be posted, please feel free to reach out to Amira and she can coordinate that to happen. The third item is the list of city projects and initiatives. At the committee's meeting in June, the chair had requested a list of city projects for the committee to consider as part of the agenda planning for 2025 and the rest of 2025 and 2026. And so we'll be going through that in this deck. There's a couple later on in the slides. Item number 4 is the additional support guidance for the committee speakers or deputants. We will be circulating, there was some feedback at our last meeting on the draft message that was created. So we'll be circulating the changes and edits that were done to that message. We'll be circulating that to the committee, and then that will be made final, and the chair will use that as a way to communicate the guidelines to any speakers and deputants who would like to speak at this committee. And finally, the response to executive committee motions. That was the update that Amira has just given.
And through the chair, just in terms of item 1 there, we wanted to see if Lindsay Kretschmer from TASC would like to speak to that at all, if you want to provide any updates. Or
Sorry, can you repeat what the item is? I was distracted.
the terms of reference review and the status around that, if you wanted to add.
Okay, so in terms of the update on the terms of reference, we have pushed the dates. We can expect to see what we hope will be completed terms of reference in the spring of 2026 at this time. We did have some challenges with the consultant's schedule that we engaged, and we are very confident as a council that this is the consultant we want to proceed with. We have publicly shared that in the last meeting, I believe, or the one prior. It's Jonathan Rudin from Aboriginal Legal Services, who we've engaged for the services of recreating the terms of reference to help support governance advancements and developments for this committee and its future. And so we hope to bring something forward in April, and we'll continue doing the work in partnership and allyship with the city.
Thank you, Lindsay. The next item on the next slide that we'll go through is the draft agenda forecasted for the next meeting, which is November 6th. So right now we have an update from TASC on the review, potentially, to see where we're at with that item. We have 2 follow-up items. The first one is the procurement procedure update, determining the evaluation team. That's from Purchasing Materials Management Division. Again, that's a follow-up item, as that group of staff were here 3 meetings ago, I believe, to provide an overview to the committee on this item. The third one is the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis procurement policy. Again, a follow-up item from the Purchasing and Materials Management Division. Additional items to be seen, and that would be confirmed using the list that we'll have, that we'll go through in a moment. And then our last item is the standing item, where we go through, the city manager's office staff go through any updates and action items and agenda planning. And go to the next slide. So for as mentioned earlier, at the June meeting, the chair of the committee had asked the city to provide a list of potential initiatives or projects that the committee could use and consider as part of their strategic planning for agendas for the next months and the next year. So what we did as a staff, we worked with internal divisions and city staff to create this list. In terms of, to guide us to create this list, we used a couple of a couple of points to guide us as we were creating this list. The first one was the AAAC thematic interests. So those interests, those area of interests and issues that the committee used to plan the agenda for this last term, so 2024 and 2025, and also those areas that we heard throughout the various meetings that were of interest to the committee. So internal processes and procedures and structures, procurement, anti-Indigenous racism, employment and training. So we kept those at the top of our mind while we were creating this list. Additionally, we looked at projects and initiatives that were key city priorities that had an impact on the Indigenous community, as well as those city initiatives and priorities and projects that had opportunity for co-development with the committee, as well as the ability to work meaningful within sufficient timelines as well. The list that you'll see before you is not exhaustive. There are additional projects. What's not included the list at this time are projects that already have established direct engagement plans. So for instance, if they're working directly with tasks or First Nations, or they have established advisory circles and bodies. But this is a first run at the list. So obviously we want to work with the committee to see how this list can be improved and what other items you'd like to see on the list. So this is the list right now. There's about 22 items here and projects. What we have is we have the list, the division that leads, the list of projects, the division that's leading it, as well as timing. And this timing is based on either the project timing and where the staff thought the best point of engagement would be with the committee. Because the list is so long, what we've done, we've separated it out by potential dates for the committee meetings, and we thought that might be a little bit easier if the committee is okay with that, to go through the list that way. It might be a little bit more digestible. So we can do that. So for the next meeting, there is a number of them. So this is something we'd want the committee to consider. We have about 7. So the first one is a budget TO, and this one I can speak to. So the city is preparing its 2026 budget and the 2026 budget process. As part of this, we are doing what we call pre-budget consultations, public consultations, where we consult the public on what is important to them to be considered as council, the mayor and council consider the 2026 budget. And so what we'd like to do in this case, if the committee agrees, would be to contact the committee and send an email with a survey that will be launched in October. So we'll send that to all the committee members, and that can be distributed to your networks, and then come back in November at this committee meeting for a facilitated session with the group to get your feedback on the budget. The other items would be Indigenous collections management for the Toronto History Museums, the Circular Economy Roadmap, the update on climate resilience plan, progress and status update on the implementation of the Reconciliation Action Plan 2022 to 2032, and Indigenous learning, corporate training, and learning opportunities. The chair, would it be easier for us to go through each one or through the whole list? I know there's quite a bit, just what's more manageable.
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Do you want me to go through, we have a list of 22.
Yeah, I don't think you need to go through the
Yes, that's why
yeah, I think the grouping of it, I like the way you've done it.
So why don't I stop here right now, and maybe I can send it back to you, Chair, to see if there's any questions or what the committee's thoughts are on adding it to the agenda for the next meeting.
Actually, before we proceed to questions and comments from committee, we'll hear from our registered speaker. So Miguel Avila Velarde.
Just a second, please. Can you hear me? Yes. All right. So I was not prepared to speak on this item, but...
One moment, sorry. I'm just going to start the timer, okay?
Okay, okay.
Miigwech, thank you.
Yes, hi. I was not prepared to speak on this item because the slide presentation was not included on the agenda last week. So this morning, when I browsed the agenda and I look at the presentation attached to today's, I see that some important systemic changes have been put back in the back burner, and I feel a bit disappointed. I don't know, I cannot see my screen, my laptop on the screen, by the way. Can somebody fix it, please? Can you hold my time? I think there's another technical problem, or I don't know. Every time I'm here, the laptop doesn't work. Scary. There I am. So back in October 10, 2024, my friend Gary in the background picture, Gary is an indigenous warrior, land defender, water defender, educator. He came to this committee and spoke to you guys about why it's important to have indigenous representation at the Police Services Board. And also, you agree that that's an important item for consideration to make sure that indigenous people are treated with kindness and respect because they're protecting the land and the waters. We also talk about the creation of an anti-indigenous racism strategy. And it seems that today, November 6th agenda has been already set up, it's chosen. We have a presentation with regards the Toronto Police Services Board. We received a lot of blah, 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 but at the end, there was no concrete action item. Are we gonna request the city manager or the guy over there on the end of the table who works for the office of the mayor to understand how important it is to have representation at the Toronto Police Services Board? It has been missing for the last 15 years, and now you want to put it back to deal with it another time, when we had a chance to do it. That is not the way to do reconciliation, my friends. So I want to request the members of this committee, please do not support these changes on the agenda because you're doing a disservice to the grassroots people that are out there on the streets fighting for everybody. And in the case of my brother Gary, he has been jailed, arrested, including myself. And I want to see some changes. And I thought that this is the right platform to create those changes. But I see that the city manager's office is dictating how indigenous people should dictate themselves. I am disappointed. And I want to recognize that I am not indigenous from this land, but my children are. And I want to ensure that they don't have to suffer racial profiling, carding, false arrests, etc., police brutality and violence that still goes on. So those things are what my brother Gary told you guys in 2024. So please reject the plan of agenda for November the 6th and put back those two important items that will ensure systemic change. And I will be speaking about the missing boys at the Toronto Police Services Board this Thursday. I already registered, by the way, and I'll be asking the board, where are we going to find an indigenous person to fill that role, to sit at the table and demand what is important for indigenous communities, not for the consultants. So, in closing, I want to share with you that on December 21st, we're going to have a flag raising ceremony where we're going to be raising the flag of the South American people of the Andes, the Huipala, which I always wear with pride. And I was asking,
Miguel, sorry, we're approaching the end of the time.
I need to wrap up. Okay. So that invitation already has been circulated. I think the city clerk shared it with everybody, and I hope to see you there. Thank you. And that concludes my deputation.
Thank you. Do any committee members have any questions for the speaker?
I'm here 24 hours, guys. You can't miss me. You're the mayor, Doctor.
Okay, we have no other registered speakers, so we'll go on to if committee members have questions for our friends from the city in regards to the presentation. Nancy, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much for the presentation that you just outlined. And as you were reviewing all the information, you talked about projects. I did want to bring to your attention and remind the committee that the City Council accepted the property of 15 Denison Street as designated for Indigenous affordable housing several years ago. Francis would have more on the history of the timing of that. And that has been held up. So there's a couple of points to be made with regards to the subject of projects that I think is relevant to your presentation. One is there anything that the city manager's office can do to inquire about the status of 15 Denison Street for affordable housing for Indigenous people? Where did that go? And the second question, or the second comment that I want to make about that and the projects is follow through is a problem. That was raised with Miguel's presentation, and I'm raising it about 15 Denison Street. And while I appreciate the tremendous work that the city manager's office is doing in conjunction with our committee, follow through has continuously been a problem to get the results on the subjects that this committee has brought forward. And so with that in mind, I hope that we can all move towards a resolution for some of these issues that have been on the table since time immemorial. Thank you.
Miigwech, Nancy. Anybody else? Does anybody else want to talk to this issue or have a question?
Sorry, through the chair, just if I could respond to Nancy, I believe. So what we could do is take that back and see, look for additional items for the list to track. And additionally, what we've tried to do, and again, thank you for that feedback, and we can continue to do is we have that status tracking exercise that we're doing with the committee. And so hopefully we can continue to improve that with your continuous feedback as we move forward together.
And through the chair, if I could also just address one of the comments made by Nancy. In terms of some of the topics that have been brought up by the committee members in the past as areas of interest, for example, an anti-Indigenous racism strategy, we have taken that back and looked into that with staff and explored that. There is currently no strategy at the city, but in terms of the project list you see here, there are actions being taken at the city that are meant to confront anti-Indigenous racism. And so that's some, I think, important context about this list as well. So for example, you see the item, and I can put the slides back on the screen, the item about Indigenous learning, corporate training, activities. So that item is meant to confront anti-Indigenous racism and would be combined with other items on that list and other actions being taken by staff at the city as related to that topic. And so we can go through that list more, highlight some of those, come back with that if that's helpful. But we wanted the committee to know that we're hearing that and taking that back and trying to address that as much as possible in terms of areas of interest of the committee. Miigwech.
Motion to receive the
information. I'm looking for a motion to receive the information for consideration. Can somebody make? Wonderful. Thank you, Richard. All those in favor? Carries. Miigwech.
That concludes our business for today. Before we end, if Larry can just do a closing for us so we can thank the ancestors and let them go.
Okay, thank you very much. Creator, thank you for holding this space for us today. We felt the presence of mind, body, and spirit here today. Knowing that we have support beyond what our eyes can see, we thank the earth beneath our feet for bearing witness to our intentions, plans, and relationships. We thank the star nations for watching over us, the ancestors who blessed our vision. We are grateful. May we continue to walk in a good way together, hand in hand, spirit to spirit. Remember to listen to one another. We're grateful for all that was created today in this space, and we close the time together with a blessing for all. Placing your hands on your heart, close your eyes. Allow yourself to feel gratitude for all your blessings in your life. Take a deep breath into your heart and hands. Send all of that gratitude out to the world, knowing that gratitude attracts beautiful things in our life. We send the thanks to the land that holds us here, the cosmos that support our visions, and to each and every one of you, I am grateful for your time here today. Chi Miigwech, thank you.
Miigwech, this meeting is now adjourned. Miigwech, everyone. Have a great day.